Vita Luna was the kind of restaurant where even laughter felt expensive. The lights glowed softly, the music stayed low, and the staff moved as if every step were rehearsed. Nothing unexpected ever happened there until the night he walked in. At exactly 8:30, the private door opened, and Ren Takeda entered. Every sound in the restaurant vanished. Forks stopped halfway to plates, and conversations broke off mid-sentence. Even the pianist faltered for a moment. The silence that followed wasn't polite, it was fearful. Everyone in Los Angeles had heard of him, the mysterious heir to a powerful Japanese family rumored to control half the city's underground. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black suit that seemed carved to fit him. His hair was dark and perfectly styled, his movements calm and precise. But his eyes, cold, deep, unreadable, were what made people lower their heads. He looked like a man who had seen too much and cared too little. Ren walked to his usual corner booth, the one half hidden in shadow. 2 bodyguards followed and took positions by the wall, silent and alert. The head waiter approached, pale and sweating. "Good evening, sir. Your usual table. Would you like water?" Ren said quietly, not looking up from his phone. The waiter froze. Of course, sir. I'll." Ren raised his eyes, just slightly, and the poor man lost whatever words he'd been about to say. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then a young woman's voice broke through the tension. "He asked for water." Every head turned. The voice belonged to Aya Miller, one of the waitresses. She was 24, with soft brown hair tied neatly in a ponytail and a plain red apron over her black uniform. She was quiet, polite, and usually invisible in the chaos of fine dining. Until now. Ren's head turned toward her slowly. His gaze locked on hers with unnerving precision, and the space between them seemed to shrink. Aya swallowed hard but didn't look away. "You said you wanted water," she repeated gently. Ren's eyes stayed on her. "You understood me," he said, his voice low and smooth, with a faint accent. "I did," she said. "My grandmother was Japanese. She taught me a few things." The corners of his mouth lifted barely, almost imperceptibly. "Interesting." His tone made the word sound like both a compliment and a warning. He glanced at the trembling head waiter. "Let her bring it." Aya hesitated, then nodded. She poured a glass of water and walked to his table. Her hands felt shaky, but she kept them steady. When she set the glass down, he put away his phone and looked up at her fully for the first time. Up close, he was devastatingly composed, sharp lines, calm posture, and a presence that filled the room like smoke. "Thank you," he said. His voice carried the kind of authority that made obedience feel like instinct. "You're welcome," she managed softly. He studied her for a long moment. "Your name?" "Aya Miller." He repeated it slowly, as though testing how it sounded on his tongue. "Aya Miller," he said at last. "You speak the language of ghosts." She blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means you've just reminded me of people I can no longer talk to." His gaze drifted past her toward the dark window and the faint city lights beyond. For a heartbeat, she saw something, grief, maybe, flash behind his calm expression. When he looked back at her, the emotion was gone. "Thank you for the translation," he said quietly. "That will be all for tonight." Aya nodded, retreating. The restaurant slowly came back to life, soft voices returning, silverware clinking again, but the air still felt heavier somehow. In the kitchen, the head waiter grabbed her arm. "Are you out of your mind?" he hissed. "You don't talk to him unless he asks you to." "He did ask," Aya said. "He just spoke another language." "That's not the point. Do you even know who that is?" "No," she admitted. "Good," the man said grimly. "Keep it that way. You want to live a long life. Don't attract his attention again." Aya looked through the small window in the kitchen door. Ren was still sitting there, untouched glass of water in front of him, staring into it like it held a memory. That night, when Aya went home, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, the stillness, the sadness, and heard his voice again. "You speak the language of ghosts." The next evening, Vita Luna tried to pretend nothing unusual had happened. The lights gleamed, the air smelled faintly of wine and lemon, and the piano hummed softly in the background. Aya told herself she wouldn't look toward the private door. She lasted exactly 6 minutes. At 8:30, the door opened. Ren Takeda stepped inside again. This time, he scanned the room the moment he entered. His eyes found Aya almost immediately. It was like being caught in a current, his gaze sharp, assessing, cold and warm all at once. The head waiter looked like he might faint. "Mr. Takeda, good evening. Your table is." "I want her," Ren said simply, pointing at Aya. The room went silent again. Forks paused, whispers died. "Yes, sir, she's new," the waiter stammered. "Perhaps someone more experienced." Ren's eyes narrowed just slightly. "I said I want her." The waiter froze. Aya felt her heart pounding in her throat. "It's all right," she said softly before anyone else could speak. "I'll take care of him." The waiter stepped back, face pale. Aya walked toward Ren's table, aware of dozens of eyes following her. Ren was seated in the corner booth, his phone on the table again. He slid it aside as she approached. "Good evening," she said. "Would you like to start with something to drink?" He looked at her evenly. "Do you always ask questions you already know the answers to?" She frowned, unsure how to respond. "You already know I like water," he said, his voice calm but teasing. "But tonight, I'll have sake." Aya nodded quickly, grateful to have something to do. "Any preference?" "Something clean. Warm." She hesitated, then said before she could stop herself, "That's a strong choice for dinner." Ren raised one eyebrow. "Are you questioning my taste?" "No," she said quickly. Then, a little quieter, just surprised. "You don't seem like the type who drinks what everyone else does." That small shadow of a smile appeared again. "Maybe I'm more traditional than I look." Aya went to fetch the drink. When she returned, she poured it carefully, both hands steady. He watched her every movement as if studying a puzzle. "You were taught proper manners," he said. "Not many are. My grandmother raised me," she explained. "She believed how you serve someone says a lot about you." "She was right," Ren said. "Was." "She passed away 3 years ago." Something flickered across his expression, quick, controlled, almost regret. "I'm sorry." Aya nodded. "She'd probably just be glad I still remember her lessons." Ren looked at her for a long time before speaking again. "You should be careful with respect," he said. "In my world, it can be mistaken for weakness." Aya tilted her head. "What kind of world is that?" His eyes lifted to hers. "One full of wolves." The words hung in the air, and she felt a small chill. "And what are you?" she asked before she could think. He didn't hesitate. "A wolf who's learned how to hide among men." She didn't know whether to believe him or laugh. He didn't sound proud, only tired. He studied her face. "You don't look away when I speak. Everyone else does." "Why?" Aya met his gaze. "Because you haven't done anything to make me afraid of you." He smiled faintly. "Fear doesn't always need a reason. Sometimes it's just smart." "Maybe," she said softly. "But sometimes it just keeps people lonely." The words seemed to catch him off guard. For a moment, he looked less like the untouchable man everyone feared and more like someone carrying too much silence inside him. Before either of them could speak again, his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, his eyes flickering with irritation, then turned it face down on the table. "You're new here," he said. "Why this job?" Aya hesitated. "Because it pays well. My mother's sick. The bills don't stop coming." He nodded slowly, thoughtfully. A familiar story. That surprised her. "You've been through something like that." "Everyone has debts," he said quietly. "Some are just harder to pay." The silence between them stretched, filled with something heavy but not uncomfortable. Aya could feel her curiosity burning brighter than her fear. After a few moments, she asked, "You come here often?" "Every week," Ren said. "It's quiet." "I like the silence." "Most people don't," she said. "Most people can't afford it," he replied. The words made no sense at first, but they sounded like the kind of truth that came from experience. The chef sent out the seared tuna. Aya placed it in front of him. Here you go, she said. Would you like anything else? Yes, he said. Sit. Aya blinked. I'm sorry. He gestured to the seat across from him. Sit down. I can't. I'm working. It wasn't a question. Her co-workers were watching again, pretending not to. Aya hesitated only a second longer before sliding into the seat. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. Ren picked up his chopsticks and started eating in silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer. Do you know who I am? No, she said honestly. Should I? He looked at her as though weighing her answer, then said, no. That's what makes you interesting. She smiled nervously. You're not really a restaurant person, are you? He gave a quiet laugh, a low, unfamiliar sound that made her skin prickle. What kind of person do I look like to you? Someone people stop breathing around, she said before thinking. That's not normal. He leaned back slightly, amused. Fear keeps people alive. And you? She asked. Do you ever feel fear? He didn't answer right away. When he finally did, his tone was almost distant. Once. What happened? I realized the people I trusted most could destroy me. And they did. The way he said it, flat, without anger, made her heart ache a little. I'm sorry, she said. He looked at her again. You ask questions like no one else. That's probably because I don't know when to stop talking, she said with a nervous laugh. He smiled, not a cold, sharp one this time, but real, almost human. Don't stop, he said. It's refreshing. Before she could respond, one of his bodyguards approached and bent close, murmuring something urgent. Ren nodded once and stood, leaving a folded stack of bills on the table, far more than the meal cost. He turned to her. I'll be back tomorrow, he said quietly. Be here. Tomorrow's not my. Be here, he repeated, and walked away without looking back. For a long moment, Aya sat frozen. Then she glanced down at the table. The glass of water he'd ordered was still half full. The head waiter appeared beside her, whispering harshly. Do you have any idea what you've just done? Aya shook her head. That man is Ren Takeda, he hissed. They call him the Wolf of the West. You don't get noticed by him unless he wants something. And when he wants something, people disappear. Aya looked toward the private door where Ren had vanished into the night. Her pulse was still racing, but it wasn't just fear, it was something else. Something she couldn't quite name. When her shift ended, she walked home under the city lights. The streets glowed wet with recent rain, and the reflection of passing cars shimmered like broken glass. She told herself she should be scared. She told herself she wouldn't go back. But as she reached her apartment, one thought kept echoing in her mind. He said he'd come back tomorrow. The next day crawled by slower than any day Aya could remember. Her co-workers whispered around her like she wasn't there. Every time she caught fragments of their conversations, the words were the same, his coming again tonight. By the time her shift began, her nerves felt like exposed wires. She tried to focus on cleaning glasses, folding napkins, anything to keep her hands from shaking. But deep down, she already knew the truth. Ren Takeda always meant what he said. When the clock hit 8:30, the private door opened. He entered like before, calm, deliberate, unhurried. 2 guards followed, scanning the room before taking their positions by the wall. Ren's gaze found her instantly, like he'd known exactly where she would be. Good evening, Miss Miller, he said in his smooth voice. The sound rolled through her like distant thunder. I trust you're working tonight. I am, she said, forcing a polite smile. Would you like your usual table? I want the one by the window tonight, he replied. I prefer to see the city. Aya led him there. He didn't look around. His focus stayed on her as though she were the only thing that existed in the room. Once he sat down, she handed him a menu. You already know what I like, he said quietly. You choose. She blinked. Me? Yes. His eyes softened slightly. Surprise me. Aya hesitated, then nodded and went to the kitchen, trying not to show how fast her heart was beating. When she returned 20 minutes later, she carried a tray with grilled salmon glazed with miso, steamed vegetables, and a side of jasmine rice. She set it in front of him carefully. Ren looked at the plate for a moment before speaking. You cook. Sometimes, she said. When I have time. And who taught you? My grandmother again, she said, smiling faintly. She believed food speaks when words can't. He looked up sharply, holding her gaze. You sound like her. Aya frowned. You didn't know her. No, he said softly. But I've known people who believed that too. She wanted to ask what kind of people, but something in his expression stopped her. There was grief there, quiet, well-buried grief. He started eating, and she stepped back to give him space. When she tried to turn away, his voice stopped her. Sit. Her instinct was to refuse. Every rule said not to, but she'd already broken those rules twice. And maybe, deep down, she wanted to know what came next. She slid into the chair across from him again. He ate in silence for a while, his movements precise, almost ritualistic. Finally, he said, you should know something about me. Aya froze. Okay. I don't make small talk, he said. I don't ask questions I don't care about. When I speak, I expect the truth. She nodded slowly. I can handle that. He studied her face. Good. Then tell me, why did you really speak to me that first night? She hesitated. Because you asked for water, and nobody understood. It didn't seem fair. Fair, he repeated, as if testing the word. You don't strike me as someone who risks her job for fairness. Aya's cheeks warmed. I didn't think about it. I just reacted. Ren leaned back, eyes narrowing slightly, as though she were a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. People don't usually react to me with kindness. That's not true, she said. Maybe they just don't get the chance. He chuckled softly, a sound that was almost a sigh. You have no idea what kind of world you're speaking into. Aya looked down. Maybe not. But you keep coming back, so I must be doing something right. Ren's eyes darkened. Maybe that's the problem. Before she could ask what he meant, one of his guards approached, murmuring something in low tones. Ren nodded once, his face hardening. He turned back to her. I need to leave soon, he said. But I want to ask you for something. What? Come outside with me, he said simply. After your shift. She stared at him. Why? Because there's something you should see. Aya's pulse jumped. I don't think that's a good idea. My manager. I'll speak to him, Ren interrupted. You finish your work. I'll wait. And just like that, he stood, left a stack of cash on the table again, and disappeared through the side door, his guards following like shadows. When the restaurant finally closed for the night, Aya found Ren standing outside beneath the awning, smoking quietly. The streetlights cast silver reflections along the wet pavement. You shouldn't be here, she said, half whisper, half plea. I could say the same about you, he replied. Walk with me. She hesitated. Then she remembered the warning her manager had given her, don't get noticed by him. Too late for that, she thought. They walked along the quiet street, their footsteps echoing faintly. The city felt different at night, slower, darker, more honest. After a few minutes, Aya asked, what did you want to show me? Ren gestured toward the skyline. That view. She followed his gaze. The city stretched wide, a sea of lights and movement, endless and indifferent. Everyone thinks this city is alive, he said. But it's not. It just hides the rot under pretty lights. Aya glanced at him. And you don't hide it. He smiled faintly. I built it. The words sent a small shiver down her spine. You're serious? Deadly, he said. My family runs most of the port operations here. We decide what comes in and out, legally or otherwise. I control things people pretend not to see. Aya stopped walking. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't lie to people I respect, he said. And because you need to understand what happens when someone like me starts noticing someone like you. What happens? She whispered. He turned to face her fully, his expression calm but unreadable. You become visible. And visibility, in my world, is dangerous. She looked at him for a long time, her fear mixing with something she didn't understand, something that felt like fascination. You could have let me stay invisible, she said. I tried, he said quietly. You spoke anyway. A car pulled up near the curb, sleek, black, tinted windows. Ren opened the back door for her. I'll have you driven home. I can take the bus, she said. He shook his head. Not tonight. Aya hesitated, but something in his tone left no room for argument. She got into the car. As it pulled away, she looked out the window and saw Ren watching until she disappeared around the corner. The next morning, Aya woke with the uneasy feeling that she'd dreamed the whole thing. But when she checked her phone, she found a message from an unknown number. You looked afraid last night. That's good. Fear means you still understand danger. Ah. Her hands trembled slightly as she read it. Then another message appeared seconds later. Dinner tonight. My car will pick you up at 7. Don't bring excuses. Aya stared at the screen for a long time before setting it face down on the table. She told herself she wouldn't go. She told herself she wasn't stupid enough to walk willingly into a world that even the police avoided. But as the clock inched toward evening, she found herself standing outside the restaurant in her nicest dress, heart racing. At exactly 7, a sleek black car pulled up. The driver stepped out and opened the door without a word. Aya climbed in. The city rolled by in a blur of lights and shadow. When the car finally stopped, she found herself outside a tall building overlooking the water, glass, steel, and silence. The driver opened the door again. Mr. Takeda is expecting you. Inside, the elevator carried her to the top floor. The doors opened to reveal Ren waiting in what looked like a private suite, part office, part sanctuary. He was dressed casually this time, no tie, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. The air smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. You came, he said simply. You didn't really give me a choice. There's always a choice, he said. Most people just don't like the consequences. Aya crossed her arms. So what is this? Some kind of intimidation dinner? He gave a quiet laugh. If I wanted to intimidate you, you wouldn't be standing. Then why am I here? Because you intrigue me, he said. You looked me in the eye when everyone else looked at the floor. You spoke to me when silence was safer. You remind me of something I lost. She frowned. What did you lose? He turned to the window, looking out at the dark waves below. Peace, he said. And the version of myself that believed I could have it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he gestured to a small table set with 2 plates. Sit. Eat. Aya hesitated, then sat down. The food was already served, simple but elegant. They ate quietly for a while before Ren spoke again. I looked into you, he said suddenly. Aya froze. You what? I had to, he said calmly. You work in my territory. It's routine. That's not an excuse. It's the truth, he said, his tone firm but not cruel. You live in a small apartment in Westlake. You take care of your mother. You studied languages at college but dropped out 2 years ago. You have no criminal record, no debts except medical ones. You're cautious but proud. Aya's mouth went dry. That's invasive. It's survival, he said quietly. People die because they don't pay attention to details. That doesn't make it right. He leaned forward slightly. You think I care about right and wrong? Maybe not, she said. But you talk about peace like someone who wishes he did. Ren's expression softened just a little. You're brave, he said. Or reckless. Maybe both. I can live with that. He poured himself a drink, then looked at her. Do you know what people call me? She shook her head. They call me the Wolf of the West, he said. Because when I want something, I don't stop until it's mine. Aya met his gaze. And what do you want now? He smiled faintly. I'm still deciding. She held her ground. You can't just pick people like they're items on a menu. Can't I? Not if you want them to stay. The words surprised even her. But Ren didn't look angry, he looked thoughtful. You speak to me like you're not afraid, he said. I am afraid, she admitted. I just don't let fear make my choices. He watched her quietly, then stood and walked to the window again. I've spent years surrounded by people who pretend to respect me but really fear me. You're the first one who's ever looked at me and seen something else. Maybe that's because I didn't know who you were. Maybe, he said. Or maybe you're just seeing what I stopped believing existed. He turned back to her, his face shadowed but his eyes strangely human. The people I've trusted have betrayed me. The people I've helped have tried to destroy me. You spoke to me for no reason. That's rare. I spoke because you looked lonely, she said softly. Ren froze. The silence stretched. Then he said, loneliness is safer than betrayal. And yet you invited me here, she said. So maybe safety isn't enough anymore. He looked at her for a long moment before nodding slowly. Maybe not. Then, almost gently, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a small phone, and placed it in front of her. My number, he said. If anyone ever bothers you, call me. I don't need protection, she said automatically. He gave a small, knowing smile. Everyone needs protection. Some just don't realize it until it's too late. He walked her to the elevator when dinner ended. Be careful going home, he said. This city watches more than you think. Aya stepped inside the elevator, turning to face him one last time. And what about you? What about me? He asked. Who protects you? He smiled faintly. No one, he said. That's how I've survived. The doors closed between them, leaving Aya alone with the sound of her own heartbeat. When she reached the street, she realized she was still holding the phone he'd given her. And though she told herself she'd never use it, she didn't throw it away either. The following days passed in a strange haze. Aya went to work as usual, served customers, smiled when she was supposed to, and went home when her shift ended. Yet nothing felt normal anymore. Every time the restaurant door opened, she found herself glancing up, half expecting to see Ren Takeda standing there again. But he didn't come. Not for 2 days. By the third night, she almost convinced herself it was over, that she'd been a passing curiosity to a man who lived in a different world. And yet, a part of her felt the smallest sting of disappointment. When he finally appeared again, 3 days later, she nearly dropped the tray in her hands. He looked the same and yet different. His suit was darker than usual, the collar slightly open, a shadow of exhaustion under his eyes. Even his movements seemed heavier. The room went silent again, but this time, Aya didn't feel afraid. When his eyes met hers, there was something raw there, like the calm surface of a lake that hid something restless beneath. He took his usual table, and without waiting for the head waiter, said softly, "Bring me tea." Aya nodded and went to prepare it. When she placed the cup before him, she noticed a thin line along his left hand, half hidden beneath the cuff of his sleeve, a scar, red and fresh. "You're hurt," she said quietly. Ren's eyes flicked to his hand. "It's nothing." "That's not nothing," she insisted. "It looks new." He leaned back slightly. "You worry too easily. Only when someone bleeds in front of me and calls it nothing." That earned a small smile. "You're braver than you look." Aya folded her arms. "You keep saying that like it's an insult." "It's a warning," he said softly. "Bravery gets people killed in my world. Then maybe you should stop living in that kind of world." Ren stared at her for a long moment before answering. "If it were that easy, I already would have." The silence between them thickened. Then Aya sat down across from him again, ignoring the rules. "What happened?" she asked. Ren hesitated. For a man who always seemed in control, it took him longer than expected to answer. "A deal went wrong," he said at last. "Someone I trusted thought they could take what was mine." "Did they?" "No," he said simply. "But they won't make that mistake again." There was no anger in his tone, just quiet certainty. Aya shivered, not from fear but from the way he said it, like it was just another fact of his existence. "You could leave, you know," she said softly. "Walk away. Start over." Ren laughed quietly, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Walk away to where?" "You don't leave my world, you just stop breathing in it." "That's not true for everyone." "It's true for me," he said. "My name carries weight that can't be dropped. Even if I ran, it would follow me." She looked at him carefully. "Then why are you telling me all this?" He met her eyes. "Because you spoke to me like I was human when everyone else saw a monster. I don't know what that makes you, foolish or fearless, but either way, I find myself wanting to tell you things I shouldn't." Aya lowered her gaze, unsure what to say. His honesty felt heavier than the danger in his words. Ren took a slow sip of tea, then said, "You should stop talking to me." "Do you want me to?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "No. That's the problem." He reached into his jacket and placed a folded piece of paper on the table. "Take this." Aya frowned. "What is it?" "My driver's number. If you're ever in trouble, any kind of trouble, call. No questions." "I told you before," she said quietly, "I don't need protection." Ren's expression hardened, though not with anger. "Then consider it a favor I'll collect someday." She took the paper hesitantly. "What kind of favor?" "The kind I'll decide when the time comes." Aya slipped it into her pocket. "That doesn't sound fair." He smiled, a rare, almost gentle expression. "Fairness doesn't exist where I come from." He rose to leave. As he adjusted his cuff, the scar on his hand caught the light again. Aya reached out without thinking, her fingers brushing his wrist. "Does it hurt?" she asked softly. Ren froze. No one touched him without permission. Not his guards, not his associates, no one. But Aya's hand was small, warm, and careful, like she wasn't trying to claim anything, only to understand. For a brief second, he didn't move. Then his voice came out lower than usual. "Not anymore." She let go quickly, cheeks flushing. "Good." He turned toward the door, but before leaving, he said over his shoulder, "Be careful walking home tonight." "Why?" "There are people who might notice you now," he said. "Because I did." The words followed her long after he left. That night, when Aya finally got home, she found a black car parked across the street. The engine was off, but she could feel eyes watching from inside. She closed her blinds, her heart pounding. She didn't call the number in her pocket. But she kept it near her bed, just in case. The next week blurred together. Aya worked, smiled for customers, and tried to pretend her life hadn't quietly shifted. But every time the door opened, she expected him. And every time he didn't appear, she felt a strange ache that she didn't want to name. When Ren finally returned, it wasn't quiet. He came surrounded by 4 bodyguards this time, all wearing dark suits and sharp expressions. They scanned every corner of the restaurant before letting him sit. The entire staff froze. Even the owner came out from the back, bowing slightly. "Mr. Takeda," he said nervously, "we weren't expecting." Ren raised a hand, and the man fell silent. "I'm not here for business. I'm here for dinner." Then his eyes found Aya. "Come," he said simply. She walked toward him, feeling everyone's stares prick her skin. When she reached his table, she tried to speak normally. "What would you like tonight?" "You," he said. Then, after a pause, "to serve me." Her breath caught. "All right," she said quietly, forcing composure. "Your usual table?" "Yes. And bring your honesty. I'm in short supply of it today." She followed him to the booth, aware of the whispers following behind. When he sat down, he didn't pick up the menu. Instead, he looked out the window, the city lights flickering against the glass. "Something's happening," he said quietly. Aya frowned. "What do you mean?" "People testing my patience," he said. "In my line of work, that never ends well for anyone." She studied him. "You mean someone's challenging you?" "Yes," he said. "And I'm deciding whether to let them live long enough to regret it." Aya didn't flinch. "Is this how it always is for you? Threats, revenge, control?" He turned his gaze back to her. "Yes. And for a long time, I believed that was all life was. Until you opened your mouth that first night. That was just water, Ren." He gave a soft laugh. "No. That was the first time in years someone spoke to me like a man and not a name." The way he said her name, soft, steady, made her chest tighten. "You make it sound like I did something extraordinary," she said. "You did," he said. "You saw me." Aya didn't know how to answer. The air between them thickened until it almost hummed. Finally, she broke the silence. "You said people might notice me. Were you right?" Ren nodded. "They've already started asking questions." "About me? About why I've suddenly changed my routine," he said. "They want to know who you are." Aya's stomach dropped. "And what did you tell them?" "The truth," he said. That you're just a waitress who speaks too honestly for her own good. She tried to smile, but her hands were trembling. That doesn't sound very safe. It's not, he admitted. That's why I'm moving you. Moving me, she repeated. To where? He looked at her evenly. I own the building above the restaurant. One of the apartments is empty. You'll stay there for a while. I can't just move into your property, she said quickly. That's insane. It's protection, he said. You'll be safer there than in that neighborhood you live in. I'll be fine. He leaned forward, his tone shifting from calm to sharp. Aya. Last night, a car followed you home for 3 miles. She froze. What? My people handle surveillance for me, he said. They noticed. I told them not to intervene yet. Her throat tightened. So you really are watching me? I'm keeping you alive, he said quietly. That's different. She looked away, shaking her head. I didn't ask for this. No, he said. But you earned it the moment you refused to be afraid. Aya didn't know whether to be angry or terrified, or both. You're controlling everything. Ren's gaze softened. No. I'm trying to control what I can. The rest is chaos. She met his eyes. And where do I fit in? He smiled faintly. You're the chaos I didn't expect. For a long time, neither spoke. The sound of rain began to tap softly against the windows. Finally, Aya asked, what do you get out of this? Protecting me? Ren looked down at his scarred hand, tracing it absent-mindedly with his thumb. Peace, he said. Maybe for a moment. Aya's heart ached. You think I can give you that? You already did, he said. The night you spoke to me. She sat back, overwhelmed by the weight of his words. It was reckless, dangerous, and yet something inside her refused to walk away. Ren stood and buttoned his jacket. I'll have someone bring you the keys tomorrow. Don't refuse them. Ren. He stopped. Don't make me ask twice. He left, his guards moving silently behind him. The sound of the door closing felt final, yet not an ending, more like the beginning of something neither of them could undo. That night, Aya walked home alone again. The streets were quiet, the lamps flickering in the misty drizzle. Halfway down the block, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, but the street was empty. When she reached her building, a small black envelope waited taped to her door. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a single key and a card that read, "For when you decide to stop pretending you're not in danger." Ah. She stood there for a long moment, rain dripping from her hair, staring at the key gleaming in her palm. Then she looked up at the empty street and whispered, "What are you doing to me?" The next morning began with a knock at Aya's apartment door. She opened it to find a man in a black suit holding a small box. He didn't smile, didn't introduce himself, only handed her the package and said, "From Mr. Takeda." Then he left. Inside was a key attached to a silver chain and a simple note. "You're not safe where you are. Use it tonight." Aya stared at it for a long time. The last few days had already turned her life into something she barely recognized. Now she was supposed to move into a place owned by the most dangerous man she'd ever met, a man she wasn't even sure she should trust. But when night fell, she saw a dark sedan parked across the street again, the same one as before. Her decision was made for her. She packed a small bag and took the elevator up to the 10th floor of the building above the restaurant. The hallway was quiet, the air faintly scented with cedar and coffee. Her key fit perfectly into apartment 1003. Inside, the space was stunning, modern, clean, minimalist. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the glowing city. There was a small kitchen, a living area with a soft grey sofa, and a single bedroom. Everything was calm, silent, perfect. Too perfect. A note waited on the counter. "You'll be safe here. No one knows this apartment exists except me." Ah. Aya sighed. "Of course not," she muttered. But deep down, a part of her felt oddly comforted by his caution. She spent the next few days trying to live normally. She worked her shifts at Vita Luna, cooked small meals, and kept her phone close, the one Ren had given her. It stayed silent, yet she found herself checking it constantly. Then, on the 5th night, everything changed. The dinner rush had just begun when the first crash echoed through the kitchen, the sound of shattering glass. Aya turned sharply, heart racing. The head chef shouted something, but his voice was drowned out by another sound, a sharp pop, like fireworks. Gunfire. Someone screamed. Plates fell. People ducked behind tables. Aya froze for one heartbeat before instinct took over. She crouched behind the counter, pressing her hands to her ears as more shots rang out from outside the restaurant. Through the window, she caught a flash, 2 dark cars, men in masks, and the unmistakable glint of metal. Her breath came in shallow bursts. The air smelled of smoke and panic. Then, suddenly, the gunfire stopped. Tires screeched. Silence fell, the kind of silence that makes your pulse feel too loud. When she finally dared to lift her head, one of the waiters was sobbing on the floor. The front door was shattered. The restaurant was ruined. Aya's hands were trembling when she heard someone call her name. Miss Miller. She looked up to see one of Wren's men, the one who had brought her the key, rushing toward her. His suit was torn at the sleeve, and his jaw was bleeding. "You need to come with me," he said firmly. "What happened?" she whispered. "Not here. Now." He grabbed her wrist and pulled her toward the back exit. They hurried through the alley to a waiting car. Aya stumbled into the back seat, adrenaline still pounding through her veins. Wren was there. He sat in the corner, calm and composed as if the world outside wasn't falling apart. His sleeves were rolled up, his tie gone, but his expression was steady. When he saw her, his jaw clenched slightly, relief hidden beneath control. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No," she said, still shaking. What was that?" "An attack," he said quietly. "A message." "From who?" He didn't answer immediately. His gaze hardened. "Someone who wanted to remind me that peace doesn't last." Aya swallowed. "Someone from your world." "Yes," he said. "And now they know you exist." Her stomach turned cold. "Because of you." Wren's eyes met hers, calm but unflinching. "Yes. Because of me." Silence filled the car. She could hear her own heart racing. "Finally," she said, "so what happens now?" "I take you somewhere safe." "I already live in your apartment." "How much safer?" "Not safe enough," he interrupted. "They found the restaurant. They'll look for connections." She turned to him, voice trembling. "You're saying they'll come after me?" "Yes," he said simply. The car moved smoothly through the city streets. Aya stared out the window, watching the blur of lights and shadows, trying to process the words. "You should have left me alone," she whispered. "This wouldn't have happened if..." Wren's voice cut through hers, soft but sharp. "If I'd ignored you, you'd still be serving dinner to men who think your silence makes you invisible. You'd still be small. That was better than being a target." He looked at her, then really looked, and said quietly, "You were always a target. You just didn't know it." Aya's throat tightened. She turned away. Neither of them spoke for the rest of the drive. They stopped outside a different building, this one lower, older, and less polished than Wren's apartment tower. Inside, the lights were dim and warm. The air smelled faintly of leather and rain. "This is one of my safe houses," he said. "No one outside my inner circle knows about it." Aya followed him upstairs to a small room. It was simple, a bed, a chair, a lamp. Safe, maybe, but suffocating in its isolation. "I don't want to hide," she said. Wren stood near the doorway, his hands in his pockets. "You don't have a choice tonight." She turned on him. "You keep saying that. Like I'm something you own." His voice stayed calm. "You're something I protect." "I didn't ask for your protection." "No," he said, his tone darkening, "but you have it anyway." She glared at him. "You think you can control everything." "I don't think," he said softly. "I know." For a moment, the air between them felt electric. Aya wanted to yell, to tell him he was arrogant, dangerous, impossible, but all that came out was a whisper. "You're going to destroy me." Wren's expression shifted, just slightly. "Not if I can help it." Then he turned and left, closing the door behind him. Aya sat on the edge of the bed, her whole body shaking. She hated the way her heart still jumped when she heard his voice, The way fear and something else, something warmer, twisted inside her. Outside, she heard the low rumble of his men's voices and the sound of footsteps pacing. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. When she finally lay down, exhaustion won over fear. She fell asleep clutching the phone he'd given her, just in case. Aya woke to the sound of rain tapping against the window. For a moment, she forgot where she was until she saw the unfamiliar walls, the guarded shadows moving outside the window, and the note on the nightstand. "Don't leave until I return." Ah! Her chest tightened. He was gone. She made coffee, sat in silence, and tried not to think. But her mind wouldn't stop. The gunfire, the broken glass, the blood on that man's sleeve, all of it looped through her head until she wanted to scream. By afternoon, the door opened, and Ren stepped inside. He looked different again, colder, sharper. His sleeves were rolled up, his watch streaked with water. There was a faint bruise along his jaw. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "Barely," she said. "You?" He shrugged. "Not much." There was something in his tone she didn't recognize, weariness, maybe. He walked past her and poured himself a cup of coffee. For a while, they said nothing. The rain outside filled the silence. Finally, Aya asked quietly, "Was it them? The people who attacked the restaurant?" "Yes. And you dealt with it?" "I did." She hesitated. "What does that mean?" Ren turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "It means you don't have to worry about them anymore." Aya exhaled slowly. "So, they're gone?" "Yes." Something inside her twisted. The simplicity of the word made her stomach turn. "Do you ever feel bad about that?" His jaw tightened. "No. Not even a little." He looked at her, and for the first time, his calm cracked. "If I did, I'd never stop. And people like me don't get the luxury of guilt." The quiet after that was heavy. Aya looked down at her hands. "I don't know how to live in your world," she said softly. "I don't think I want to." "Good," he said. "That means you still have a choice." She met his eyes. "Do I?" Ren took a step closer, then another. "You can leave. Walk away. Forget I exist. I won't stop you." Aya's heart pounded. "Would you really let me go?" His gaze softened just slightly. "If that's what you want." She looked at him, at the scar on his hand, the bruise on his jaw, the exhaustion behind his steady eyes. And she realized something she didn't want to admit. She didn't want to leave. "Not yet." Instead of answering, she said, "You shouldn't keep paying for things I didn't ask you to fix." Ren frowned. "What do you mean?" "My rent. My mother's hospital bills." She took a step closer. "You think I don't know? The hospital called this morning. Everything's been paid." Ren said nothing, but the silence confirmed it. "You can't just do that," she said, voice trembling. "You can't decide what parts of my life you own." "I wasn't buying anything," he said quietly. "I was paying a debt." "What debt?" He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "The one I created the night I walked into your life." Aya stared at him, unable to speak. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded paper, the first note she had written to him at the restaurant, the one where she translated his request for water. "I keep it," he said. "To remind myself that even in silence, someone once listened." Aya felt something break inside her, the fragile wall she'd been building between fear and compassion. She took the paper from his hand and held it tightly. "You don't owe me anything," she said. Ren smiled faintly. "That's where you're wrong. I owe you everything I've forgotten how to feel." The words left her breathless. He stepped closer. She could smell the faint scent of rain and smoke on his clothes. For a moment, neither of them moved. The world outside faded, no rain, no noise, no fear. Only the quiet space between them. Then Ren said softly, "You should rest. I have things to take care of. Will you come back?" His eyes held hers. "Always." He left before she could answer. The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving Aya alone with her thoughts and the growing realization that she was no longer just a bystander in his world. She was part of it now. The following evening, Aya stood on the balcony of the apartment Ren had given her. The city stretched out below like a field of stars, cold, beautiful, and distant. She had been staring at that skyline for nearly an hour, trying to make sense of how her life had changed so quickly. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a secret. Her phone buzzed softly against the railing. One message. Be ready in 10 minutes. I'm sending a car. Ah. Her pulse quickened. She changed quickly into a dark dress, the simplest one she owned. When she stepped outside, a sleek black car waited. The driver nodded silently and opened the door for her. The ride was quiet, smooth, almost too calm. They drove through the city, leaving the bright downtown lights behind for older streets lined with warehouses and closed storefronts. Finally, the car stopped in front of a towering building that seemed more like a fortress than an office. The driver stepped out. His waiting inside. Aya hesitated before stepping through the glass doors. The air inside was cold, sterile, humming faintly with electricity. 2 guards nodded at her as she passed. The elevator opened on its own. She stepped in, pressed the top floor, and watched the city shrink below her as the doors slid shut. When the elevator stopped, the doors opened to a world she didn't expect. The floor wasn't an office, it was a penthouse. Minimalist. Expensive. Quiet. The walls were lined with books and abstract paintings. Large windows framed the skyline. Ren stood near one of those windows, hands clasped behind his back, looking out at the rain-dark sky. You came, he said without turning around. I didn't exactly have a choice, Aya replied. He glanced over his shoulder. You always have a choice. I simply make it easier to say yes. I'm not sure that's comforting. He smiled faintly. It wasn't meant to be. She walked further into the room. Why did you bring me here? Ren turned fully, his dark suit catching the faint light. Because it's time you knew who I am. I already do, she said. You're Ren Takeda. Everyone whispers your name like it's a warning. He shook his head. That's the version they know. The one they're afraid of. You should see the truth. He gestured for her to follow him down a hallway. The space opened into what looked like a private study, but it wasn't ordinary. The walls were lined with monitors displaying maps, numbers, shipping routes, photographs. In the center, a long table was covered in documents, some marked with red ink. Aya looked around slowly. This looks like a control room. In a way, it is, Ren said. This is how I keep order. Every business, every deal, every person under my control is tracked here. Her eyes moved to a map of the city filled with red and white pins. This is your world. He nodded. The Takeda Group controls most of the shipping lanes along the coast. Some legal, some not. We move goods, money, information. And sometimes, people. She turned toward him. You're showing me this because, why? So I'll be afraid. Because I trust you, he said simply. She blinked. You shouldn't. I know, he said, a small smile touching his lips. That's what makes it interesting. He walked to one of the tables and picked up a framed photograph. This was my father, he said quietly. The picture showed a stern man in a black suit, his face a mirror of Ren's, though colder. He built this empire. I inherited it after he was killed. How? Aya asked softly. Betrayal, Ren said. A man he trusted poisoned him. And I was the one who dealt with it. Aya hesitated. You mean? Yes. His eyes didn't waver. I ended it. That's how I learned what power costs. For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain outside had grown heavier, tapping softly against the windows. Why are you telling me all this? Aya asked finally. Because once you see my world, Ren said, you can't unsee it. And once you can't unsee it, you can't leave. Her breath caught. That sounds like a threat. It's a truth, he said. But it's also an invitation. She frowned. To what? He stepped closer. To understand me. To see the man behind the stories. And maybe, to decide for yourself whether he deserves to be hated. His tone was calm, but there was something vulnerable beneath it, something human. Aya didn't know how to respond. She wanted to walk away, to keep her life simple, but his words had already tied invisible threads around her heart. Finally, she whispered, "And if I say no?" Ren's eyes softened. "Then I'll let you go. But you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what else I was hiding." She looked at the rain-soaked skyline, at the faint reflection of her own face beside his in the window. "You really believe people can't walk away from you?" "They can," he said quietly. "They just don't." Aya met his gaze again. "Maybe they're too scared to." Ren smiled faintly. "Maybe. But I'd rather be feared than forgotten." For a moment, she saw something flicker in his eyes, loneliness, regret, maybe even a wish for something beyond control and obedience. Then the intercom buzzed. One of his men's voices crackled through. "Sir, we have movement at the East Dock. You'll want to see this." Ren's expression hardened instantly. The softness vanished like it had never been there. "Business calls," he said. "You'll stay here until I return." Aya frowned. "What's at the dock?" "Trouble," he said. "But nothing I can't handle." He grabbed his jacket and left without another word. Aya stood alone in the room surrounded by screens and maps. The hum of the monitors filled the silence. She felt like she was standing in the heart of a machine, one that could crush her with a single decision. And yet, a strange part of her wasn't afraid. She was fascinated. Hours passed. Aya paced the penthouse, restless, replaying every word Ren had said. The rain stopped. The city lights shimmered on wet streets below. She was about to sit when the elevator chimed. The doors slid open, and Ren stepped out, soaked, his shirt stained with something darker than rain. Aya rushed toward him. "Ren. I'm fine," he said, voice flat. "It's not my blood." She froze. "What happened?" "Someone decided to test how far they could go," he said. "They learned quickly." His movements were stiff as he pulled off his jacket and tossed it aside. His hand was bleeding again, the same scar reopened, raw and red. Aya grabbed a towel from the counter. "Sit," she said firmly. "You need to clean that." He raised an eyebrow but obeyed, lowering himself onto the couch. Aya knelt in front of him, dabbing gently at the wound. The air between them felt charged, quiet, fragile. "You shouldn't have gone out there," she said. He gave a soft laugh. "You sound like you care." "Maybe I do." Ren's smile faded. "That's dangerous." "So is everything about you," she said, meeting his eyes. "But I'm still here." He didn't look away. "Why?" "Because you keep showing me pieces of yourself no one else sees." He was silent for a long moment, watching her hands move carefully over his skin. Finally, he said, "Do you know what they call me?" "You told me," she said. "The Wolf of the West." He shook his head slowly. "That's what they call me in Los Angeles. In Tokyo, they called me something else. Oni." "What does that mean?" "Demon." Aya looked up. "Why?" "Because when my father died, I didn't just take control," he said quietly. "I erased everyone who had a hand in it. Everyone. Men, families, even children old enough to understand what their fathers had done. It wasn't justice. It was fury." Her hand stilled. "You killed them." "Yes," he said. "And I didn't stop until no one dared to speak his killer's name." She couldn't speak for a moment. The quiet stretched until it became heavy. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked finally. "Because you keep asking who I am," he said. "And this is the answer. I'm not a savior. I'm not a victim. I'm a man who became what the world forced him to be." "But you regret it," she said softly. His eyes flickered. "If I did, I'd fall apart. Regret doesn't belong to people like me." Aya took a deep breath. "Then why tell me at all?" He leaned back, exhaustion slipping through his composure. "Because when you look at me, I see something I don't deserve. You make me remember what I used to be before all this." "What were you then?" Ren smiled faintly, bitterly. A son who thought he could make his father proud. Aya sat beside him quietly. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The sound of the rain had returned, soft and distant. Finally, she said, "You don't have to be that man anymore." He turned to her slowly. "It's not that simple." "It could be," she said. "You just have to stop choosing pain." Ren studied her face, as if trying to find a flaw in her conviction. Then, quietly, he said, "You make it sound easy." "It's not easy," she said. "But it's possible." He looked down at his bandaged hand. "You think you can save me?" "I don't want to save you," she said. "I want to understand you." He smiled, a faint, almost broken curve of his lips. "No one's ever said that to me before." "Well, now someone has." He reached out suddenly, fingers brushing her cheek. His touch was warm, tentative, almost uncertain. "You don't belong here," he said softly. "In this world. In this room. With me." "Maybe not," she whispered. "But I'm here anyway." Their eyes met, hers steady, his stormy. For a moment, time stopped. Then, without thinking, he leaned forward and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't soft. It was a clash: anger, longing, fear, everything neither of them knew how to say. Her hands found his shoulders, his fingers slid into her hair. The kiss deepened, pulling both of them into the same dangerous gravity they'd been circling for weeks. When he finally pulled back, his breathing was rough. "This is a mistake," he said. "Then why does it feel right?" "Because everything forbidden does," he said. They sat in silence for a long while. Then Ren stood, walking to the window, his reflection dark against the glass. "War is coming," he said quietly. "Tonight proved it." Aya rose slowly. "What are you going to do? End it before it reaches you?" She shook her head. "You can't protect me from everything." "Watch me," he said. "Ren." He turned, his voice quiet but firm. "You're the only thing in my life that feels real. I'm not losing that." Aya looked at him, at the man the world called a demon, and saw, for the first time, someone still fighting to remember his humanity. She stepped closer, touching his arm gently. "Then don't let this war take what's left of you." He looked down at her hand on his sleeve and, for a moment, simply nodded. "I'll try," he said softly. "For you." That night, after Ren left again, Aya stood by the window, watching the city below. The rain washed the streets clean, but she knew the world beneath those lights was anything but pure. Still, she couldn't deny what she'd seen, or what she felt. The man they called a demon had bled for peace. And somehow, impossibly, she had begun to care for him. 2 days passed without word from Ren. The apartment was too quiet, the silence pressing against Aya's chest like a weight she couldn't lift. Every time her phone vibrated, she jumped, only to feel the same hollow disappointment when it wasn't him. She told herself she shouldn't care. She should be relieved. Distance meant safety. But each night, she found herself staring at the city skyline from her window, searching for the reflection of headlights that never came. On the third evening, her phone finally buzzed. "Be ready in 15 minutes. Wear something you can move in." Ah! She almost laughed. Move in? What did that even mean? But she obeyed. Something in her gut told her this night wasn't like the others. She threw on jeans, a dark jacket, and sneakers, then tied her hair back. The moment she stepped into the hallway, the elevator doors slid open. 2 of Ren's men waited inside. Neither spoke as they escorted her downstairs to a car. The city rolled by in heavy silence. When they stopped, she recognized the building immediately: Ren's headquarters. But this time, the entrance was crowded. Black cars lined the street, and men in suits were talking in low, urgent tones. The air felt charged, tense. Ren appeared near the entrance, speaking to a group of bodyguards. When he saw Aya, his expression softened, a flash of relief before his usual calm returned. "You came," he said. "You asked," she replied, trying to steady her voice. "What's going on?" "Trouble," he said simply. "But not the kind you can hide from." "Then why am I here?" He looked at her. "Because if anything happens, I want you where I can see you." Before she could argue, the sound of screeching tires tore through the night. A car rounded the corner too fast, headlights cutting through the rain. The men around them reached for weapons instantly. Aya froze. The car skidded to a stop near the gate. 2 men jumped out, one dragging the other, bleeding, toward Ren. "Boss," one of them shouted. "They hit the warehouse." "Takahoshi's men. They're everywhere." Ren's eyes narrowed. "How many?" At least 20. We lost 3 already. Aya's stomach dropped. You're under attack. Ren turned to her, voice firm. Go inside. Now. She shook her head. I'm not leaving you. Don't argue, he said, already moving toward his car. This isn't a request. I won't hide while you. He grabbed her shoulders, eyes fierce. Aya. If you stay, I can't focus. Do you understand? Go inside and lock the doors. His voice was low, but it carried a weight that left no room for defiance. Aya stepped back, shaking, and let one of his guards lead her into the building. The doors closed behind her, muffling the storm outside. Through the window, she saw the convoy of black cars speed into the night, Ren's car at the front. Then silence again, broken only by the pounding of her heart. Hours passed. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight. Aya sat curled on the couch, her phone clutched in her hand. Every passing minute stretched like an hour. When the elevator finally chimed, she bolted upright. Ren staggered in. His white shirt was streaked with blood, his hair damp from rain and sweat. His expression was calm, but his movements were slower than usual. One hand clutched his side. Ren. Aya ran to him, catching his arm before he could collapse. You're hurt. It's nothing, he said, but his voice wavered. A scratch. Don't lie to me, she snapped, dragging him toward the couch. Sit down. He let her. His breath came unevenly as she tore open his shirt. The wound wasn't deep, but it was ugly, a long, angry slash across his ribs. Who did this? She demanded. Takahashi, he said through gritted teeth. He thought he could finish what he started. Aya pressed a clean towel against the wound, trying to steady her shaking hands. Why didn't you go to a hospital? Ren gave a faint, pained smile. Hospitals ask questions. You need stitches, Ren. He caught her wrist. You're shaking. Because you almost died. Not yet, he said softly. You're too angry for me to die. Aya glared at him, but tears burned at the corners of her eyes. She forced herself to focus on cleaning the wound. Ren watched her quietly, his breathing shallow. After a few minutes, he said, You shouldn't have stayed. And you shouldn't keep getting hurt for people who don't deserve you. He chuckled weakly. You think I do this for them? Then who for? She asked. He hesitated, then said quietly, For what little I have left. For what I can't lose again. Their eyes met. The room fell silent except for the rain and the sound of their breathing. Aya's hands trembled as she tied the last bandage in place. Ren reached up, his fingers brushing her cheek. Every time you look at me, he murmured, I remember what it's like to be human. She didn't speak. Couldn't. The space between them narrowed until his breath mingled with hers. Don't, she whispered. You're bleeding. He smiled faintly. Then we'll bleed together. And then he kissed her. It was slow at first, hesitant, but it deepened with a desperation neither could stop. His hand cupped her face, hers gripped his shirt. The world outside disappeared. There was no blood, no enemies, no fear, only the taste of rain and the sound of hearts beating too fast. When they finally broke apart, Aya's voice was barely a whisper. This changes everything. Ren's eyes softened. It already has. She wanted to say something more, something rational, but his exhaustion caught up to him. He leaned back against the couch, eyes half closing. Aya brushed a strand of hair from his face. Sleep. He smiled faintly. Stay here. I wasn't planning to leave. For the first time since she met him, Ren fell asleep without guards, without walls, without his armor. Aya sat beside him, listening to his breathing, the rise and fall of his chest. And though she knew their world was built on danger, she also knew that somewhere between fear and chaos, something fragile and real had begun. Ren was gone by sunrise. Aya woke to an empty couch, the faint smell of coffee in the air, and a note beside her. You shouldn't have seen me like that. I'll handle what's coming. Don't leave the apartment until I say so. Ah. She stared at the note for a long time. It was written in his usual, precise handwriting, calm, unbothered, as if he hadn't nearly bled out in her arms. But the stains of dried blood on the towel told a different story. Aya made herself breakfast she couldn't eat, then paced the living room. She couldn't sit still. Every sound outside made her jump. The waiting was unbearable. Finally, around noon, her phone buzzed. It wasn't a message this time, it was a call. Unknown number. She answered instantly. Ren. The voice on the other end wasn't his. Miss Miller. Her stomach dropped. Who is this? My name doesn't matter, the man said. I work for Mr. Takeda. You need to listen carefully. Her pulse spiked. What's happening? There's been a breach, the man said. We're moving him to a secure location. Until further notice, you'll remain where you are. A breach? What does that mean? Is he's alive, the man interrupted. But they're closing in. This is bigger than before. They hit 2 of our warehouses last night and a convoy this morning. Aya's knees weakened. He's fighting a war. Yes, the man said grimly. And it's only starting. The line went dead. By evening, the city seemed to pulse with tension. News reports mentioned a series of industrial accidents near the docks, but Aya knew better. She could feel it, the quiet panic beneath the city's surface. Every few hours, someone knocked on her door to check on her. Ren's men, silent and efficient. They never said much, only that she was safe. But she didn't believe that anymore. She wanted to see him. To know he was okay. So that night, she made a decision. She slipped on her jacket, tucked the spare key into her pocket, and left. The elevator was guarded, but she waited until one of the men stepped aside to answer a call. Then she slipped through the emergency stairs and disappeared into the street. The air outside was sharp with rain and exhaust. She hailed a cab and gave the only address she knew, Ren's headquarters. When she arrived, the building was in chaos. Men shouted into radios, cars came and went. The smell of gunpowder lingered faintly in the air. Aya pushed through the lobby, ignoring the protests of the guards. Where is he? She demanded. One man blocked her path. Miss Miller, you can't be here. I'm not leaving without him. Before he could argue, a familiar voice cut through the noise. Let her through. Ren. He stood near the stairs, his shirt rolled up, his forearms streaked with grime and bruises. His expression hardened when he saw her, but his eyes betrayed something else, relief. Aya, he said quietly, leading her into a side room. You shouldn't have come. I couldn't stay there, she said. You said you'd handle it, but I keep hearing about people dying, about attacks. He closed the door behind them. I told you to stay safe. Safe where? You call this safe, she snapped. You can't keep fighting everyone and expect to survive it. Ren rubbed a hand over his face, sighing. You don't understand how this works. Then explain it to me. He looked at her, really looked, and his voice dropped lower. If I don't finish this, they'll come for you. They already know your name. They know where you work. You think you can go back to being invisible? That ended the night you spoke to me. Aya's breath caught. So this is my fault. No, he said, stepping closer. It's mine. Because I couldn't stay away. Their eyes met, and the distance between them dissolved again. I don't care what you've done, Aya whispered. I just want you to come back alive. Ren's expression softened, something breaking quietly behind his calm. You shouldn't say things like that. It makes it harder to let you go. I'm not asking you to. He reached out, brushing his thumb across her cheek. You think I can choose peace, Aya. But peace doesn't exist for people like me. Then make it exist, she said fiercely. For once, fight for something that isn't power. For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy and electric. Then Ren smiled faintly, sad, almost tender. You really don't know what you've done to me. Before she could ask what he meant, one of his guards burst through the door. Boss. They've hit the east line. We're losing ground. Ren straightened instantly, his face turning cold again. Get everyone ready. I'll be there in 5 minutes. The guard nodded and vanished. Ren turned back to Aya. You need to go back to the safe house. I'm not leaving you. He cupped her face in both hands, his voice suddenly soft. I won't ask again. Please. Something in his tone, not the command, but the plea, made her chest ache. She nodded slowly. Promise you'll come back. He hesitated, then said, "I'll try." That wasn't enough, but it was all he could give. He pressed a brief kiss to her forehead. "Go." Aya left, escorted by one of his men. As the car pulled away, she looked back at the building, at the flickering lights, the men rushing inside, the shadow of Ren disappearing into the chaos. And for the first time, she realized what love truly meant for him. It wasn't flowers or promises. It was survival, bloody, relentless, and never guaranteed. The city didn't sleep that night. Helicopters hovered in the distance, their searchlights slicing through the fog. Sirens echoed faintly, blending with the hum of rain and the whisper of fear that had settled over everything. Aya sat by the window of the safe house, her phone in her hands, waiting for a message that never came. Hours bled into dawn. The sky turned from black to gray, then to the bruised blue of early morning. Still, nothing. Every time her phone lit up, her heart jumped, but it was always a text from a number she didn't recognize. Ren's men, sending updates she barely understood. The east docks are gone. The north route is secure. Boss hasn't checked in. By noon, she couldn't take it anymore. She threw on a jacket, ignoring the guards stationed in the hallway, and pushed past them. "Miss Miller, you can't leave," one shouted. "I'm going to find him," she said, her voice trembling but firm. They followed her out, arguing, but she didn't care. She hailed the first cab she saw and gave the driver the address of Ren's headquarters. He hesitated when he saw the look in her eyes and drove without another word. The streets around the building were chaos. Police cars blocked the intersection, though none of the officers dared to enter. Smoke drifted from somewhere nearby, and the faint smell of burning oil filled the air. Aya pushed through the crowd, ignoring the tape, ignoring the shouts behind her. She needed to see him. When she turned the corner, she froze. The building, his building, was in ruins. One side had been torn open by fire. Windows shattered. The ground was littered with glass, shell casings, and blood. Ren's men were everywhere, dragging wounded allies into cars, shouting orders, scanning the rooftops for snipers. Her breath caught in her throat. "Ren!" A familiar voice called out behind her. "Aya!" She turned. It was Kato, the quiet man who always guarded the car. His jacket was torn, his face smeared with soot. "He told me to find you," Kato said urgently. "You shouldn't be here." "Where is he?" she demanded. Kato hesitated. "He's still inside." She didn't wait. She ran toward the broken doors before he could stop her. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and gunpowder. Sparks crackled from the ceiling. Aya coughed, covering her mouth as she stumbled forward. She found him on the upper floor, or what was left of it. Ren stood amid the wreckage, surrounded by shattered glass and broken furniture. His white shirt was stained with soot and blood, his knuckles raw, but he was alive. His calm was terrifying. When he saw her, his eyes widened. "Aya!" She rushed to him, tears already burning her eyes. "What have you done?" He looked past her, scanning the hall for threats. "You shouldn't be here. You said that every time something terrible happens," she cried. "And I came anyway. Because you keep trying to fight a world that only knows how to destroy itself." He stepped closer, gripping her shoulders. "You don't understand." "Then make me understand," she shouted. "Because all I see is a man trying to burn himself to ashes." Ren's voice broke for the first time. "It was them, Aya. Takahoshi's men, they came for everything. I had to end it." She looked around at the destruction. "And this is what ending it looks like." "Yes," he said quietly. "Because peace only comes when there's nothing left to fight." Her hands trembled as she reached up, touching the side of his face. "And what's left of you after that?" He didn't answer. He just closed his eyes for a moment, leaning into her touch as if drawing strength from it. Outside, thunder rolled. The rain began again, falling through the shattered roof in cold streams that hissed against the flames. Ren opened his eyes. "It's over," he said softly. "But there's a cost you won't want to know." Aya shook her head. "I don't care." He looked at her, really looked, and something inside him cracked. "I promised I'd keep you safe. But now, I can't promise anyone's safety, not even mine." She took a step closer. Then stop fighting alone. Ren let out a slow breath, his shoulders finally sagging. For a moment, the mask fell and she saw the exhaustion, the pain, the burden he carried. The Wolf of the West looked like a man who'd finally lost the strength to keep growling. Kato appeared at the door. "Boss, the cars are ready." Ren nodded, glancing back at Aya. "We're leaving." "Where?" she asked. "Somewhere no one can follow." They drove until the city disappeared behind them. The rain turned to mist, and the mist gave way to quiet countryside roads. Aya sat beside him, her hand resting on her lap, her thoughts a storm of fear and questions. Ren didn't speak for miles. When he finally did, his voice was low, almost tender. "I've been fighting this war since I was 17, he said. "And for what?" "To keep the ghosts of men like my father alive." She looked at him. "You could stop. Walk away. You don't have to keep carrying it." He smiled faintly. "You think they'll let me?" "I think you're tired of letting them decide who you are." He didn't respond, but his fingers brushed hers on the seat. The touch was brief, hesitant, yet it said more than words could. When the car finally stopped, they were on a hill overlooking the sea. The waves crashed against dark rocks below, wild and endless. Ren stepped out, breathing deeply. The air smelled of salt and rain. Aya followed, wrapping her jacket tighter. "What now?" she asked. He turned toward her, the wind tugging at his hair. "Now, I bury what's left." They built a fire on the beach that night. Ren threw a small metal box into the flames, documents, names, accounts, everything that had tied him to the Empire. The papers curled and turned to ash. Aya watched silently. "That's it. You're just letting it all burn?" Ren's eyes reflected the firelight. "Power's a lie, Aya. It only lasts as long as fear does. So what happens when the fear is gone?" He looked at her. "Then maybe there's finally room for peace." The flames roared higher, sparks scattering into the dark. For the first time, Ren looked lighter, as though the fire was burning more than paper. It was burning the man he used to be. Aya stood beside him, the heat painting her face gold. When he reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. For that one moment, surrounded by fire and ocean and rain, it felt like they'd both been reborn. The next morning was quiet. The storm had passed. The sea was calm again, sunlight turning the waves to silver. Aya woke to the sound of seagulls and the faint hiss of coffee brewing. Ren sat by the open window, wearing a clean white shirt, his jacket draped over a chair. He looked almost peaceful, almost human. She sat up, watching him. "You made coffee?" He glanced back with a small smile. "I'm capable of simple things." "I wasn't sure." He handed her a cup. "I used to make it for my mother," he said. "Before she left Japan. Before all this." Aya took the cup, the warmth seeping into her palms. "You never talk about her." "There's not much to say. She was gentle. Too gentle for the world my father built. When she died, something inside him broke. And when he broke me." Aya sipped her coffee quietly. "You've spent your whole life trying to fix his mistakes." "Maybe," Ren said. "Or maybe I just became one of them." She looked at him, her voice soft. "You don't have to be anymore." He smiled faintly. "You make that sound easy." "It's not," she said. "But maybe you can start with one simple thing." "What's that?" She set her cup down. "Stay." He turned to her slowly, the sunlight catching the scar on his cheek. "Stay." "Yes. No more running. No more fighting. Just stay." Ren's eyes searched hers for a long time. "And do what?" "Live," she said simply. "Maybe learn what it's like to be free." He looked out at the sea. "Freedom isn't something men like me get to have." "Maybe it is," she said, standing. "If you stop trying to earn it through blood." He stood too, stepping closer. "Aya." She met his gaze without fear. "You can't undo what you've done, but you can decide what comes next." He reached up, brushing his thumb along her jaw. "You're asking me to throw away everything I've built. I'm asking you to stop building things that keep you alone." For a long moment, the only sound was the sea. Then Ren exhaled, a soft, broken sound. You don't know what you're doing to me. Then let me find out. He laughed quietly, shaking his head. You really are dangerous. I learned from the best. He kissed her again, slower this time, gentler. When they pulled apart, his forehead rested against hers. If I lose everything, he whispered, but keep you, I win. Aya smiled faintly. Then stop fighting. You've already won. They stayed by the coast for several days. Ren made calls, arranged meetings, gave quiet orders. One by one, the pieces of his empire began to shift, the illegal routes closed, the books cleaned, the debts paid. His men were confused, angry, loyal, afraid. But they obeyed. They always did. One evening, Kato arrived at the beach house. It's done, he said. Everything's being transferred. The docks, the warehouses, even the Tokyo accounts. Ren nodded slowly. Good. Kato hesitated. The others won't understand. They don't need to, Ren said. They'll learn. He turned to Aya, who had been listening quietly by the window. It's time. Time for what? She asked. He took a deep breath. To make it official. To end what my father started. That night, they drove back to the city. Ren met with his remaining allies in a dimly lit room, men who had followed him through years of blood and silence. Aya stayed near the door, unseen but listening. When Ren spoke, his voice carried through the room like a quiet command. I'm dissolving the old Takeda group. From this day forward, we move clean. Legitimate business. Real names, real contracts. Murmurs filled the room. Someone laughed bitterly. You can't just walk away, Ren. They'll eat you alive. Ren's eyes flicked toward Aya at the door, then back. Let them try. The room fell silent. There was no threat in his tone, just truth. The kind that made even monsters hesitate. When the meeting ended, Aya waited by the car. Ren walked toward her, his steps slow but sure. It's done, he said simply. She smiled. And how does it feel? Strange, he admitted. But right. They stood together under the glow of the streetlights, the rain beginning again, soft, gentle, like forgiveness. Aya reached for his hand. What happens now? Ren looked at her, his expression softening. Now, he said, we see what peace feels like. And as the rain fell around them, washing away the last traces of smoke and blood, Aya realized that the man beside her wasn't the wolf of the West anymore. He was just Ren, the man who had chosen love over power. The days that followed felt unreal to Aya, quiet in a way she wasn't used to. No gunfire, no sirens, no men in black suits shadowing her every move. The storm that had consumed Ren's world had finally passed, leaving behind something new, something fragile. They moved into a small house outside the city, not one of Ren's penthouses or safe houses, but a real home. The kind with peeling paint on the windowsills and wildflowers in the yard. It was quiet there, almost too quiet. But for the first time, that quiet didn't feel like fear. It felt like peace. Aya woke early each morning to the smell of coffee. Ren had traded tailored suits for simple clothes, jeans, white shirts, rolled sleeves. He still carried the same presence, but it was softer now, warmer around the edges. Sometimes she caught him staring out at the ocean for hours, as if trying to remember how to exist without chaos. Other times, he'd help her in the kitchen, clumsy with a knife but determined to learn. You're terrible at this, she teased one morning, watching him try to chop vegetables. I used to give orders to 100 men, he said dryly, and not one of them dared correct me. Maybe because you had a gun. Maybe because they had sense, he replied, grinning faintly. You, however, have neither fear nor sense. Maybe I just like testing limits, she said. He looked up at her then, his smile fading into something more thoughtful. You do more than that. You break them. Aya felt the air shift, that quiet pull that always happened when his walls came down. She turned back to the counter before she could blush. That night, they returned to the place where it all began, Vita Luna, the restaurant that had somehow survived the fire and reopened. The owner had begged Ren to let him handle repairs quietly, without police or reporters. And now, weeks later, the restaurant looked just as it had before, polished, perfect, filled with strangers who had no idea what had once unfolded in its corners. Ren reserved the same table by the window. Aya walked beside him, her heart full of memories she couldn't ignore that first night, his voice in another language, the glass of water untouched. Now, it all felt like a story someone else had lived. When they sat down, Ren's expression was unreadable. "You know," he said softly, "the last time we were here, I asked for water. And I said something I shouldn't have," she teased. "No," he said. "You said exactly what I needed to hear." They ate quietly, comfortable in the silence they had once feared. When the plates were cleared and the waiter left them alone, Ren reached into his jacket and placed something on the table, a small black box. Aya froze. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he said, "I've spent most of my life controlling people, money, power. But I never learned how to ask for something honestly." "Ren, I don't deserve this," he interrupted gently, "but I want it anyway." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, silver, simple, with a small diamond that caught the light just enough to shimmer, not to boast. Aya's eyes blurred. "Ren." He took her hand across the table. "You once told me to stop choosing pain," he said softly. "So I'm choosing something else. I'm choosing you." Tears burned in her eyes. "You don't have to." "I do," he said firmly. "You've seen everything I am. The worst of me. And you stayed. I can't offer you perfection. I can't even promise safety. But I can promise that you'll never face the world alone again." She laughed through her tears. "That's not fair." "What isn't?" "You make everything sound like a vow," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "Maybe it is." He stood, coming around the table, and knelt beside her, not in some grand gesture, but quietly, humbly. "Aya Miller," he said, "will you marry me?" She didn't even hesitate. "Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. The restaurant blurred around them, the music, the whispers, the city outside, none of it mattered. Ren looked at her, his voice low. "There's something I've never said to anyone before." "What?" He took her hand and spoke softly, his tone both foreign and familiar. "Isho niiku." Aya tilted her head. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, smiling faintly, "let's live together." She squeezed his hand. "Then let's." When they left the restaurant, the night air was cool, and the city lights shimmered in the puddles along the street. Ren's arm wrapped around her shoulders as they walked. "You know," she said, "you never did finish your meal." "I wasn't hungry. For food. For anything that wasn't you," he said. Aya rolled her eyes but smiled, leaning into him. "You've gotten better at saying things like that. I've had a good teacher." They married 6 months later in a quiet ceremony on a hill overlooking the sea. No suits, no photographers, no guards. Just the two of them, a handful of friends, and the sound of waves crashing below. Aya wore a simple white dress. Ren stood beside her in a black shirt with the sleeves rolled, his scarf faintly visible against his skin. When the officiant asked if they promised to stand by each other through all things, past, present, and future, Ren looked at Aya and said, "I already have." And Aya, through tears, whispered, "So have I." When it was done, when they kissed and the small crowd clapped, Aya looked at him, the man once called a demon, now standing in sunlight, and knew that they had rewritten their story completely. The world outside never forgot who Ren Takeda had been. There were whispers, of course. People in expensive suits who remembered his name like a shadow. Reporters who tried to dig up what really happened to the Takeda group. But none of it reached their doorstep. Ren's empire had transformed, clean, legitimate, and quiet. The warehouses became distribution centers, the docks turned to legal trade. The men who had once carried guns now carried contracts. It wasn't an easy change, but it was real. Aya became part of it too. She handled the communication side, charities, foundations, rebuilding projects in neighborhoods the old Takeda network had once controlled. Her ability to listen, to calm people, to connect, it became the one thing that kept Ren's name out of the papers and his businesses thriving in peace. They still had security, but it wasn't the same kind of fear. It was precaution. And every evening, when Ren came home, he looked less like a man haunted by ghosts and more like someone learning how to live without them. Their wedding celebration, though small, became something whispered about in both underworld and high society circles. It was elegant but intimate, candlelight, laughter, and quiet music. Kato stood as Ren's best man, uncomfortable in a tuxedo but proud all the same. Aya's friends from the restaurant were there too, still unable to believe that the quiet waitress had married the man half the city once feared. During the dinner, Kato raised his glass. To the boss, he said, smirking. Who finally found someone scarier than himself. Laughter filled the room. Even Ren chuckled, shaking his head. You're not wrong, he said. She terrifies me daily. Aya smiled. As I should. When the laughter faded, Ren took Aya's hand under the table. Do you realize, he said softly, that this is the first time in my life I've felt like the future might actually exist? Aya looked at him. That's because it does now. He brushed his thumb against her ring. And you're sure you're ready for a life this quiet? She smiled. After everything we've survived, I'll take quiet over chaos any day. Ren leaned closer, his voice low. You say that now. Are you planning on starting another war? He laughed. Not unless you start it first. As the night went on, they stepped outside for air. The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and jasmine from the garden. The moon hung low, casting silver light over everything. Aya leaned on the railing, watching the waves crash below. Do you ever miss it? She asked quietly. Miss what? The power. The danger. The control. Ren stood beside her, his expression thoughtful. No, he said finally. What I miss isn't the power, it's the purpose. But I've found something better. She looked at him. What's that? He turned to her, eyes soft. You. Aya smiled. You're sure you're not just saying that because it sounds romantic? Maybe, he admitted. But it's still true. They stood there for a long while, the night wrapping around them like a promise. Then Aya said, you know what's funny? If someone told me 2 years ago that I'd fall in love with a man like you, I'd have called them insane. He chuckled. They probably were. And yet here we are. Ren took her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Here we are. The music from inside drifted through the open doors, soft, slow, timeless. Ren looked at her. Dance with me. Here. Here. He pulled her gently into his arms. They moved slowly, barefoot on the terrace, the ocean whispering below. Aya rested her head against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady, strong, alive. Do you ever think, she murmured, that maybe we were never supposed to meet? Maybe, he said. But if fate's real, then it made one mistake I'll never forgive it for. What's that? Taking this long to find you. Aya laughed softly. You're getting good at this. I've had practice. They danced until the candles inside burned low and the guests began to leave. Long after the last car disappeared down the road, they stayed outside, the waves crashing like applause below. Ren brushed a strand of hair from her face. You taught me something I didn't think possible. What's that? That monsters can fall in love, he said quietly. And maybe love can make them human again. Aya smiled, her eyes bright with tears. You were always human, Ren. You just forgot how to be. He leaned forward and kissed her, slow, deep, filled with everything that words couldn't hold. When they pulled apart, she whispered, so, what do we do now? He smiled faintly. We live. Later, as the house grew silent, Ren stood by the window, watching the horizon. Aya came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. What are you thinking? She asked. He placed his hand over hers. That for the first time in years, I don't feel haunted. Aya rested her cheek against his back. Good. Because ghosts don't belong in this house. He turned to face her, his eyes warm in the moonlight. No, he said. Only us. Outside, the waves broke softly against the shore, steady and eternal. Inside, Ren and Aya stood together, no longer the waitress and the mafia heir, but two souls who had found their peace in each other. The world could whisper whatever names it wanted. To them, none of it mattered. Because the demon had found his light. And she, the woman who spoke his silence, had taught him how to speak love. It had been a year since the wedding. The house by the coast had become a symbol of peace, sunlight through open windows, sea breeze carrying laughter from the kitchen, nights spent talking instead of surviving. Aya often thought that if happiness had a sound, it would be the sound of Ren's quiet voice reading aloud in Japanese from one of his old books, while she translated each line in English just to make him smile. But peace, as Ren had once told her, was fragile. It began subtly. A phone call late at night that he didn't answer. A strange car parked near the cliffs for hours. A man at the market who looked at them too long. Aya noticed first. One morning, she found Ren standing on the porch, his eyes fixed on the horizon, a cigarette burning between his fingers, something he hadn't touched since the war ended. "You're smoking again," she said softly. He didn't turn. Old habits die harder than enemies. Aya stepped closer. "What's wrong?" Ren exhaled, watching the smoke drift into the wind. "Someone's been watching us." Her stomach tightened. "How do you know?" He handed her a small piece of paper, a torn envelope. Inside was a single photo. Their photo. Taken from a distance. At the cafe by the shore just last week. Aya's breath caught. "Who?" "I don't know yet," he said. "But whoever it is, they want me to know they're watching." He turned, his expression calm but his eyes hard. "Pack a small bag. We might need to leave tonight." Aya shook her head. "No. We built this life together. We're not running again." Ren's voice was quiet, controlled, but his hand trembled slightly as he set down the cigarette. "I won't let them take it from you." She touched his face. "Then let me help. Don't protect me by locking me away again." He hesitated. Then he nodded. "All right. But if anything happens, you follow my lead. No questions." "I trust you," she said. He gave a small, sad smile. "That's the dangerous part." That night, as the sea roared outside, Ren made a call. The conversation was brief, his tone clipped, his Japanese sharp and formal, a language Aya still understood only in fragments. When he hung up, she could see something change in his eyes. "The old world doesn't forgive," he said quietly. "It waits." The next morning, Kato arrived at the house. His car was dusted with sea salt and dirt from the long drive. He looked older, tired in a way Aya had never seen before. "Boss," he said, nodding at Ren. "It's not just watchers. Someone's rebuilding the Tokahoshi line." Ren's expression didn't change. "Impossible." "They were finished." "Not all of them," Kato said. "A son. Hidden. Raised overseas. He's calling himself the new wolf." Aya felt a chill run down her spine. Ren crossed his arms, his tone steady. "So he wants revenge." Kato nodded. "He's making moves. Buying contacts, recruiting old allies. He's using your name." Aya stepped forward. "What does that mean?" Ren looked at her. "It means he's not just trying to destroy me. He's trying to be me." She shook her head. "That's insane." Ren's eyes softened. "So was I, once." He turned back to Kato. "Find him before he finds us." "And if he already has?" Kato asked. Ren looked out the window, at the waves crashing against the shore. "Then the peace I built dies here." For the next week, Ren barely slept. He was on the phone constantly, pacing through the house, speaking in low tones, coordinating with people Aya didn't know. The quiet life they had created began to crack around the edges. Aya tried to stay patient, but every time she saw the hardness return to his face, she felt something inside her ache. One night, after another tense call, she said softly, "You promised you'd left that world behind." Ren looked at her, weary, regretful. "I promised I'd protect you. That hasn't changed." "You can't keep protecting me by becoming the man you used to be," she said. He stepped closer, his voice low. "You think I want this? You think I enjoy bringing blood back into our lives?" "No," she whispered. "But you're still doing it." Ren's silence said everything. "Finally," he said, "if I don't end this now, it won't end at all." Aya's voice broke. "Then let me stand beside you." He hesitated. "Aya." "No," she said, her tone fierce. "You taught me how to face danger. Now let me face it with you." Something in him cracked. He took her face in his hands. "If you're with me, I can't lose focus." "Then don't lose me," He closed his eyes, forehead resting against hers. You have no idea how much you've changed me. Then don't change back, she whispered. Ren said nothing, but the next morning, she noticed something new. He stopped making phone calls when she was out of the room. He began to plan with her, not around her. And though fear lingered like a shadow, they faced it together. It happened 2 nights later. The storm rolled in fast, lightning flashing over the ocean, rain hammering against the windows. Ren had been standing by the window, watching the horizon, when his phone buzzed. One glance at the screen and his body went still. What is it? Aya asked. They found him, Ren said quietly. The boy. Where? Ren slipped on his jacket, his face unreadable. Tokyo. Aya grabbed his arm. You're not going alone. His voice was low but sharp. Aya, no. If you leave without me, I'll follow you, she said. You know I will. He looked at her, torn between fear and pride. Then he sighed. You're impossible. Married life, she said softly. He almost smiled. Then we go together. They flew that night. Tokyo's skyline greeted them like a ghost, neon, endless, familiar. Aya had never been there before, but Ren looked at it the way a soldier looks at a battlefield. Kato met them at the airport. We've tracked him to Shibuya, he said. He's using one of the old Tokahoshi warehouses as a front. Ren nodded. And the men? Armed. Angry. Young. They think they're resurrecting something holy. Aya spoke up. Then they don't know what they're following. Kato gave her a grim smile. They never do. The warehouse sat near the edge of the city, an old structure hidden behind shipping containers and silence. Rain fell in sheets, the pavement shining like glass. Ren's men spread out, quiet and efficient. Aya stayed close, her hood pulled low. She could feel Ren's tension like static in the air. Stay behind me, he murmured. I know. When they stepped inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint scent of gasoline. Footsteps echoed in the shadows. Then a voice came from the darkness. So it's true. The demon still breathes. Ren froze. The voice was young, sharp, bitter. A man stepped forward. He couldn't have been more than 25. Black hair, eyes cold as glass, a faint scar on his chin, one that mirrored Ren's. You're him, Ren said quietly. The son. The younger man smirked. You killed my father. Ren's tone was calm. Your father started a war. I ended it. You ended him, the boy snapped. And now I'll end you. Aya stepped forward before Ren could stop her. And then what? You become him? Another man chasing ghosts? The boy glared at her. Who are you to speak? I'm the reason he stopped fighting, she said. You think revenge will bring your father back? It'll only bury you beside him. For a moment, something flickered in the boy's eyes, hesitation, maybe doubt, but then it hardened again. You sound just like him, he hissed. Ren's voice was soft, almost mournful. I see his rage in your eyes. But I also see his end. The boy raised his gun. Then die knowing you couldn't escape it. The shot rang out. Aya screamed. But it wasn't Ren who fell. Kato had stepped between them. The bullet hit his shoulder, spinning him backward. Ren caught him as he fell. Kato. Aya cried, running to his side. Ren's voice was a low growl. You shouldn't have done that. Kato grinned weakly. Someone had to remind you, you're not invincible. The boy stepped back, uncertain now. Ren rose slowly, fury and sorrow twisting his face. You think vengeance makes you strong, he said quietly. It makes you empty. For the first time, the boy looked afraid. You took everything from me. Ren stepped closer. Then take this advice, don't finish what killed your father. He turned to Aya. Call the police. What? She whispered. I'm ending this the right way, he said. No blood. No ghosts. Aya's hands trembled as she made the call. By the time she looked up, the boy was on his knees, the gun on the floor, his eyes full of something that looked like shame. Ren stood over him, calm, resolute, unshaken. You wanted to be me, he said softly. Then learn what it means to stop. When the police arrived, Ren gave them everything, names, locations, evidence. The new Tokahoshi line ended before it ever began. As the sirens wailed outside, Aya stood beside him, her hand slipping into his. "You kept your promise," she whispered. Ren looked at her, exhaustion softening his features. "For once, I didn't have to destroy something to protect it." Kato survived. They spent weeks in Tokyo while he recovered. Aya tended his wounds with the same care she'd once given Ren. One evening, Ren stood on the hospital balcony, watching the city lights. Aya joined him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "No," he said. "If I'd killed him, I'd still be the man I used to be." Aya smiled faintly. "Then maybe peace wasn't something you found. Maybe it's something you became." He looked down at her. "You think so?" "I know so." Ren smiled, a real one this time, rare and unguarded. "You're the only person who could make me believe that." She took his hand. "Then believe it." They stood there for a long time, watching the city that had once been their battlefield. Finally, Ren said, "Let's go home." Aya nodded. Home. The word sounded like a promise. When they returned to the coast, the sea was calm again. The house stood waiting, golden in the sunset. Aya unpacked slowly while Ren walked down to the beach, barefoot, his footprints trailing through the wet sand. When she joined him, he turned and smiled. "We made it back." Aya slipped her hand into his. "We always do." He looked out at the horizon. The wolf finally found peace. Aya smiled softly. "No." The man did. The tide rose, erasing their footprints, but they didn't move. The ocean roared around them, endless and eternal, like the life they had fought to claim. And for the first time, Ren Takeda didn't see ghosts in the water, only reflections of everything worth living for. Every story leaves a shadow, and every shadow hides another story waiting to be told. If you felt the storm, the silence, and the fire in this tale, don't just disappear into the credits. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, because the next story might just pull you deeper than this one. Until then, stay curious, stay fearless, and remember, even demons can fall in love.